Blog Talk Radio.
Hello everyone, this is Laura Smith on Blog Talk Radio. Good morning. It's 6 o'clock here in the morning, Friday, June the 17th. I'm glad to be here. This is One Child Abuse Survivor to Another. One for 30 minutes. It's a live internet streaming radio broadcast from blogtalkradio.com. Chat room's open. I did pop the link in there to what I want to talk about this morning, and I lost the link from yesterday, so I'll have to go back and try to find that. But I found another one that I wanted to look at. There's a lot of web pages here from Robert Burney's site that I want to cover because all dealing with the whole emotional aspect of codependency and taking a look at boundary work and a whole lot of good stuff like that. So hopefully everybody's getting something out of this. I know I am. So thanks for being here, everybody. I appreciate it. You know, I'm not a counselor, I'm not a therapist. I'm just a private person doing my blog talk shows. And so you have to listen at your own discretion to all of my shows. You know, I'm talking about abuse. It's a sensitive subject, and a lot of people may find it bothers them, you know what I mean? So you have to know what's good for you to listen to, right? I talk about abuse and everything to go with it, so it can be disturbing, and I think that people just need to be aware that, you know, I don't sugarcoat it, I just tell it like it is. And so if it bothers you, you know, you never know if this type of topic or topic material, abuse and sexual violence and whatnot might bother you, you need to turn the show off, right? Because it is your discretion. And young people under the age of 18, I just ask that you have permission to listen to my shows. Have somebody listen to the show that's older than an adult. Like hopefully you have a parent or somebody who cares about what you're doing online, or hopefully. Not everyone does, I know that, but you know, even a coach or a mentor, somebody who can listen to the show with you, and then you can, you know, they can help you make a decision whether you should be listening, because I don't know how young the people are who are listening to my shows, right? So you want to keep yourself safe online, and it's important to me that you do that. So get the information on how to stay safe. You know, you just type into your browser, like internet safety or online safety for children, things like that. And then it'll take you to websites with good information on how to keep yourself safe online, right? So you would do me a favor and yourself a favor and do that, right? So thanks everybody for being here. We're going to look at another web page from Robert Burney, and it's from www.joy2youandme, his website. So it's www.joy2emotional_defenses.htm, and it's he's written here common emotional defenses, and I think this is good to look at because he's just, I don't know, he's really gone in and taken a real look at the whole thing, and not just individuals, you know, with our own, you know, adult survivors with our own issues, but a society as a whole, right? Taking a look at the big picture of why so many people are so dysfunctional, and our belief systems and our ideas are so distorted, and very unhealthy ways of thinking, right? So a lot of times, you know, I mean, just like anything we're doing as far as trying to heal, or to, even if we're just doing self-help or whatever, basically we're just reprogramming ourselves to feel differently, think differently, you know, so that we don't continue to carry on all these bad, you know, belief systems and bad garbage from the past, right? So we do have to change some of our behaviors, and I think it's just kind of, you know, called like reprogramming, basically. So, you know, society needs to be reprogrammed too, right? But the issue is it would be up to each individual to want to do that, because, you know, you can't force people to change the way they think and the way they feel. If they're going to hurt people, they're going to hurt people. You know, if they're going to hurt themselves, they're going to hurt themselves. It's up to each individual to want to change. And so, you know, even just taking a look at adult survivors, it's up to each person to, you know, get help. It is literally their responsibility. Can't go blaming somebody saying, oh, well, it's their fault that I didn't get help, you know. We all have to make a choice, and we all have to. So a lot of times adult survivors do not make the right choices for themselves. A lot of people in life don't, even if they weren't abused. I mean, don't have to be abused to be not making the right choices, right? Lots of people don't make the right choices for themselves many times, and I know I've been doing that my whole life. So I think it's important, you know, to take a look at some of this stuff and see just what kind of, you know, boundaries, what kind of behaviors and different things we can take a look at that we can change for ourselves to make, you know, to help ourselves out so we can, you know, enjoy this life a little bit more and have you know, a little bit more control as far as how we're going to see things and how we're going to get through the day, you know, instead of allowing our past to take over and dictate what kind of day we're going to have. You know what I mean? I think that's ridiculous. And I think, but too many people do it. I was doing it my whole life, right? And so that's why I say it's just really important to not allow ourselves to do that. We should, you know, reach out and get some help, right? So this particular page is really quite interesting, and it's called Common Emotional Defenses. And Robert Burney, he's a codependence therapist. He's also a grief counselor, and he's an author. He's written a book called Codependence: The Dance of Wounded Souls, and he's a spiritual teacher as well. So he's really done a lot of work here. If you go to his website, you can go to the site index, and you can see all the different topics that he's got. And really, he's put in probably years and years worth of work here. There's a lot of stuff. So it would take literally probably months and months to go through and read all of his stuff. But it's really, really good. I don't know how long we'll be on it, because we've already been on his webpage like 2 months. So I'm not sure how long we'll keep going. But I did want to take a look at a few of his pages, like a few more, because it's really interesting and I think it's worth looking at. So common emotional defenses, he says, one of the defenses many of us have against feeling our feelings is to speak of ourselves in a third person. Quote unquote, like you just kind of feel hurt when that happens, right? Not saying I just feel hurt, saying you just kind of feel hurt when that happens is not a personal statement. It does not carry the power of speaking in the first person. So he says here, quote unquote, I felt hurt when that happened, is personal. It is owning the feeling. Listen to yourself so that you can become more aware of this defense and start changing it, he says here. Listen to others, both in person and on TV. Refer to self in the third person, and you will gain some insight into how they are wounded. You will probably be surprised at how often you hear this defense in the course of the day as you become more conscious. This is perhaps the most common storytelling diversion is to get very involved in the details of the story. She said, then I said, then she said. The details are ultimately significant in relationship to the emotions involved, but because we do not know how to handle the emotions, we get caught up in the details. So often we are relating the details in order to show the listener how we were wronged in the interaction, and often we focus on how others are wronged in reaction to the situation as a way of avoiding our feelings. So that's kind of interesting. Excuse me, my voice is terrible today. So he says, to say I am anxious or concerned or apprehensive is not the same as saying I feel afraid. Fear is at the root of all those expressions, but we don't have to be so in touch with our fear if we use a word that distances us from the fear. So expressions like confused, irritated, upset, tense, disturbed, melancholy, blue, good or bad are not primary feeling words. That's quite interesting. Well, it's kind of true, It's kind of like when you think about the word abuse, like people, this is what I talk about, and this is what I'm the Canada Regional Director for Dreamcatchers for Abused Children, and this is what we're looking at. We're looking at child abuse, and it's a harsh situation for many, many children, and as an adult survivor of child abuse, I can tell you. But the thing is the word abuse doesn't mean anything anymore because it's too common. It's become too commonplace in people's minds. People don't think of abuse as being abuse. They think of abuse as being a spanking or, look at somebody just spank that child. Abuse has become sort of a word maybe that doesn't really affect us in a way that allows us to see what is actually happening to the child. It's not the root word. It's not the action that happens to the child when they're being abused. For instance, beaten, raped, burned, tortured, hit, right? What's another one? Any kind of thing like that. Molested, right? Those are the real actions, right? Not abuse. Abuse is the term that we use to incorporate and to encompass the whole idea of child being mistreated in whatever way. So when you say abuse, it doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? It's like when I say, okay, I fight against child abuse. People just go, oh, well, isn't that nice? But they're not thinking about the fact that I'm fighting against people who rape their children. I'm fighting against people who beat on their children. I'm fighting against people who burn their children, who kill their children. Right, so I usually don't walk up to somebody and say, I fight against people who kill their children, beat their children, burn their children, rape their children. I probably should say that because it would make more of an impact. So I like what he has to say about here. This is some of these words really are just another way to sugarcoat everything and make everything seem all right. And I think that's the whole issue is we don't take a look at what the root word is and what it really means, even in our own lives, in our own walk, Like instead of saying I feel anxious or I feel disturbed or whatever, that's all fear-based. And so, like he says, if we're not saying the real thing, I'm afraid, I feel fear, then all we're doing is sugarcoating it. Oh, I feel anxious or, that type of thing, right? So I like what he has to say. He really does take a deep look at a lot of this stuff. It's quite interesting. So a lot of this stuff is excerpts from his book, right? You can go and check this out. Common emotional defenses, he says, attempting to suppress emotions is dysfunctional. It does not work. Emotions are energy, Emotion equals energy in motion, so it is supposed to be in motion. It was meant to flow. And emotions have a purpose, a very good purpose, good reason to be, even those emotions that feel uncomfortable. So fear is a warning, anger is for protection, tears are for cleansing and releasing. So we were looking at this already. These are not negative emotional responses, so we were taught to react negatively to them. It is our reaction that is dysfunctional and negative, not the emotion. And like anger is fine. Anger is normal. I did a whole lot of work on anger because I had a lot of anger and rage within me, and I needed to actually learn a lot about it. So I spent months looking at anger and toxic shame, toxic rage, and all this, right? And it was very helpful for me because anger is normal and natural, but it's when it becomes abusive, when it turns into rage, when it turns into something that is used to hurt somebody or to hurt yourself, it's distorted, right? So becoming angry is actually a normal process, so we need to be able to handle it and do it properly, right? Because anger tells us there's something wrong. It's a warning signal that something's wrong and something needs to be fixed, right? Something's not right. Usually people don't go around getting angry for no reason. If they do, there's a problem. But usually if people get angry because something bothers them, something either hurts them, something is not right, and they see it, so it hurts them even secondhand. They might see something happen to somebody or something around the world and they get angry. Just any number of things can make somebody be angry, but especially if somebody does something to me that I may become angry, right? Anger is normal and it's natural, but we shouldn't allow it to become twisted and perverse, which is to manifest. We need to learn how to deal with it on the spot, and a lot of people don't know how to do that, especially people who have been abused. We either have a lot of rage or we don't know how to manage anger properly because we associate it with abuse. Because I associate anger especially with my mother's anger. My mother was a raging maniac throughout my childhood, because she was manic depressive, so I may as well call her a maniac. She was manic depressive, and she was out of her head, and she was miserable, married to this man that just did not love her and just didn't care about her. And she was abused as a child. She had this horrible life, and so she was really angry. She was really pissed off. And so dealing with a small child, it wasn't a good idea for her to have. Really, she should not have been looking after me. She should have given me up, when I was born, because she did not want me. I was just one more burden for her. And so when she dealt with me, she wasn't going, "Oh, I just love my little girl. Here, let me pick you up. Let's go to the park." It was like, you better get the hell out of here because I'm going to kick your ass right now. And that's how I spent my life, either running from her or getting my ass kicked, right? So it wasn't good, right? It wasn't a good way to bring a child up. And do I blame her? Absolutely, I do. It was her responsibility. Like, she should have known that her anger was manifesting to me, right? So I was just this little punching bag for her, and that was completely wrong, And nobody deserves to be treated like that, right? So then I had an unhealthy view of what anger really is, and I would get in situations where things would make me mad, and I've been tossed out of airports, tossed out of buildings, tossed out of workplaces because of my anger, because I don't know how to handle my anger properly either. And then generally I don't want to hurt anybody, so then I end up leaving, or I'll leave. If I get angry or upset, I don't know how to handle it properly. So I have a hard time breathing, and then I just think, okay, run. That's what I used to do as a child, was run. So, it's hard for me to sit there and deal with with anger with people. But I'm learning now as an older adult, how to handle it properly, that I need to allow people to see my feelings in the situation. So if I am angry and upset, it's for a reason, and that everybody's reasons are valid. If I have these feelings, something's bothering me, I need to be able to put it out on the table without hurting somebody or myself, and deal with, and get it fixed, whatever it is, right? Compromise or whatever, right? Whatever it takes. But the thing is, these things are normal, but we just need to learn how to deal with this stuff, right? So he says emotional honesty is absolutely vital to the health of the being. Denying, distorting, and blocking our emotions in reaction to false beliefs, dishonest attitudes, causes emotional and mental disease. So the emotional and mental disease causes physical, biological imbalance, which produces physical disease. So we were already taking a look at that somewhere else. I can't remember. It's the last couple of days. But he says growing up in emotionally dishonest societies with wounded parents forced us to learn ways to distance ourselves from our feelings. So in this article, he says, I'm going to talk about 3 common defense strategies we learn to protect ourselves and help us deny our emotions. So number 1 is speaking in the third person. And he says number 2 here is storytelling. And number 3, where's number 3? 3 is down below, avoiding using primary feeling words. So he's got three things he's going to take a look at here. And number one, speaking in the third person, one of the defenses many of us have against feeling our feelings is to speak of ourselves in the third person. So he says, you just kind of feel hurt when that happens. It's not a personal statement. So he says, it's not the same. It doesn't carry the same power as saying, I felt hurt when that happened, right? So instead of saying, you just, like saying, somebody saying, oh yeah, you just feel terrible when somebody does that to you. Instead of saying, I feel terrible when somebody does that to me, right? Because totally, that does take the power away from it. What it does is doesn't allow you to, I guess what it does is it allows you to see it in third person, and that way it doesn't hurt so much. Is when I say, if I try to say something like, oh, it just hurts when a child's when you are hurt or abused, right? Instead of saying it really hurt when I was abused, because then you're owning it. You know what I mean? And so I think it's just important for us to not do that. We need to own our feelings, right? And I mean, I understand most of that, Some of it I don't want to own because I just sort of assumed that I was picking up the garbage when I was owning all that, right? Because I already threw away that stuff. It was all in a necklace hanging around my neck. That's how I perceived it, right? All of this garbage from my past and all this hurt and all this torment was on this necklace hanging around my neck, and it was just there, and it was heavy, and it was dragging around with me everywhere. So I decided to take off the necklace and throw it away, right? So I mean, that's how I envisioned myself throwing that garbage away because it didn't belong to me. I didn't want it. And I was like, why do I have to even carry this thing around? This is not mine. And, this was put on me by some other people who just decided to put this on me, so forget it. So I threw it away. And doing that, I think I sort of, I don't know, made a deal that I sort of disowned. I did not want to take that as my own, right? And so I think there's a couple different ways of how people will look at this stuff and see this stuff. Some people will say, oh no, we need to own every bit of it. And other people will, like myself, think that, no, I really don't want to do that. It's on a necklace and I already threw it away. It's gone. I can't even find that necklace again. It's just gone. I wouldn't be able to go and pick it back up because I threw it away. So it's just in oblivion. It's just gone. So it's kind of interesting, really, when you think about it. But I understand what he's saying about, owning the feelings and stuff. Because what it does is allows us to really accept what happened to us, and as long as we're in denial, it will never really be able to get very far. You can't get very far. You can't get very far in anything if you're just going to be in denial. You know what I mean? If we're just going to be in denial, we'll never really be able to see what happened and be able to get in touch with some of those feelings, and because we won't allow ourselves to, right? So being in denial is not good. So we do have to own this stuff, right? So he says, to say I feel angry or I feel sad is owning the feelings. So it is emotional honesty and helps us to get in touch with the emotional energy that exists in our bodies. Referring to ourselves as you is a form of emotional dishonesty. And this is what he's talking about, emotional honesty, emotional defenses, right? So he says, number 2, storytelling. This is a very common method of avoiding our feelings. Some people tell entertaining stories to avoid feelings. They may respond to a feeling statement by saying something like, I remember back in 85 when, right? Their stories might be very entertaining, but they have no personal, immediate emotional content. And he says, some people tell stories about other people. They will respond to an emotional moment by telling an emotional story about some friend, acquaintance, or even a person they read about. They may exhibit some emotion in telling the story, but an emotion for the other person, not for self. So they'll have emotion for the other person, but not for themselves. They keep a distance from their emotions by attributing the emotional energy they are touching on to being about someone else other than themselves, right? That's quite interesting, I think. I've heard people do that lots, where they were included in the whole thing, but yet they don't have any feelings about it for themselves. They only have feelings about it for the other people. They don't allow themselves to be part of it. I think my sister's like that. I'm not so much like that because I'm willing to address the stuff and put myself in there, but she's definitely not because she's in denial, that's why. So she's just being emotionally dishonest with herself and everybody else. Then there's a stereotype codependent of the joke. So when a codependent dies, someone else's life passes before their eyes. So if this type of codependent is in a relationship, everything they say will be about the other person. So direct questions about self will be answered with stories about the significant others. This is a completely unconscious result of the sad fact that they have no real concept of self as an individual entity. That's kind of interesting. So he says, perhaps the most common storytelling diversion is to get very involved in the details of the story. She said, then I said, then she said. The details are ultimately insignificant in relationships to the emotions in relationship to the emotions involved, but because we do not know how to handle the emotions, we get caught up in the details. So this is what we were reading earlier, what he was talking about there. So he says, if someone is telling you a story and you find your mind wandering and boredom setting in, it is because they are not being emotionally honest. Often the person will be coming from a victim self-pity perspective and may even be crying while telling their story, but the crying they are doing is not emotionally honest. It is part of the role they are playing and probably have been playing for years. So expressing feelings in a martyr's role created by the false self is very different from expressing grief in relationship to self. So the martyr who is blaming is being dishonest both emotionally and intellectually. That's kind of interesting. Maybe so, because my mother was like that. Because my mother was like that big time. Because she would be sitting around, oh, I was abused as a child. Woe is me. My husband hates me, and my children aren't very good to me. They hate me, and she'd be crying the blues, and I should kill myself, and I should have just killed myself years ago, and woe is me, poor me, And she just got so used to doing that. That was just like her normal thing, you know what I mean? So we'd all be coming in from outside from playing or whatever in the evening. She'd be sitting at the kitchen table smoking her cigarettes, crying away, oh, poor me. It was just, she just got used to playing that martyr role, And of course she was miserable. I don't blame her, but she could have got out of that marriage. I mean, she didn't have to stay. There was nobody tying her down. She was just tied down in her mind. She was totally screwed. But, it's just kind of, it's interesting, that I'd have to dig a little bit deeper in there to see, exactly what he's talking about here, about the martyr who's blaming, is being dishonest with both emotionally and intellectually. Because my brain doesn't quite get it, but I'll probably do some thinking about it over the next few days, just to see what he's talking about there. So he says, number 3, avoid using primary feeling words. So there are only a handful of primary feelings that all humans feel. And there is some dispute about just how many there are primary, but for our purpose here, I'm going to use 7. So those are angry, mad, sad, hurt, afraid, scared, lonely, ashamed, happy, glad. So it is important to start using the primary names of these feelings in order to own them and to stop distancing ourselves from the feelings. So, wow, that's interesting. So it's just angry, mad, sad, hurt, afraid, scared, lonely, ashamed, and happy and sad, and glad. Happy and glad. That's weird. So he says to say I am anxious or concerned or apprehensive is not the same as saying I feel afraid. So fear is at the root of all those expressions, but we don't have to be in touch with our fear if we use a word that distances us from the fear. So expressions like confused, irritated, upset, tense, disturbed, melancholy, blue, good or bad are not primary feeling words. We are trained to be emotionally dishonest in childhood. So in order to start peeling the layers of denial, it is vital to get aware of our own emotional defenses. So in order to start getting emotionally honest with ourselves, let alone with anybody else, he says, anyone else, it is vital to start recognizing with our own emotional defenses, the little tricks of language and focus that we learned to help us distance ourselves from feelings that we did not know how to deal with. He says becoming willing to get conscious of our own defenses is a vital step in getting in touch with our own feelings. Learning to be emotionally honest with ourselves is an important part of the recovery healing path. Well, that's just it. You know what I mean? And that's really what I'm doing right with my healing journey, is being honest. Like I know when I sat down and I decided to go public, and tell my story on my blog, first of all, I wrote a blog October 2009, and it was because really what pushed me to write the blog was because my dad was staying with me, and I had let him stay with me for a year, and he had moved in July of that year, 2009. So he had been there for July, August, September, October. By October, he'd almost driven me crazy again, and I could see the same old behaviors, and all these memories started coming back of, just our relationship, our dysfunctional relationship the whole time. And, I thought, man, this is, like, I have to be able to get the truth out to who this man really is, to me, right, and who he is and what I've seen him do to my family. Because right now the world thinks he's this most wonderful man, and the world just loves my dad, and it's like, and I sit there and I think about all the horrible things that he did, and even though, part of me says, okay, well, we have to forgive, we have to forgive in order to move on, and then, stuff like this. Nobody's perfect, we all make mistakes. The bigger part of me can understand that. But that little child inside of me that still remembers all that stuff, and even the teenager that inside of me that still remembers all that stuff, is not about to let him get away with that. You know, I'm like, no way is the world going to love my dad without at least the truth being told. And it was the same for my mother. You know what I mean? Like, I, as much as I want to say, okay, she didn't start out her life saying, oh, I just want to abuse my children. I'm just going to have a bunch of kids and I'm going to abuse them. It's going to be great. She never set out to do that. Neither one of my parents set out to do that. They did not have the coping skills or the mental capacity or the coping skills to raise a large family, let alone one child, right? So, I mean, one child would have been a problem, but, 7 was really a problem. And they had their own problems. Their marriage was a problem. And they never should have been married, and they never should have gotten married until they got a whole lot of counseling, psychotherapy or whatever, because the two of them were mentally ill and very twisted. So, it's very sad that people do this, that people that are mentally ill and very twisted have children and then produce these people who have to go and try to figure this life out without really any resources. I mean, there's some resources out there. Mainly you have to do it yourself, And it's hard because life's not set up for this. Society is not set up for dysfunctional people. Society says, "Oh, if you're dysfunctional, if you were born into a home that was dysfunctional and you've suffered a lot of abuse, you just go stand in the corner over there because we really don't want to deal with you." You know what I mean? It's kind of like, so even as a child you couldn't get any help, and as an adult, half the time we can't get any real help because how can they help us? You know what I mean? But it is important to realize that there are certain things that do work. And if you haven't done any therapy, I mean, I myself haven't done any real, one-on-one therapy or anything like that, any professional therapy. I'm doing all my stuff self-help. But I talk to a lot of different, and have heard from a lot of different counselors and therapists and people that have gone to do the therapy, right? And there is stuff out there that can really help us. So if you're struggling and you just feel like, oh man, I'm not making any progress, and why am I just still stuck in this, the same feelings, just trapped in this mess, why can I not seem to move on and move forward, it's important to reach out, and get some help, because honestly, like, we just have to keep pushing until we get the help we need. We have to become our own best advocates, I know myself that that's exactly what I would do if I felt that I wasn't making any progress. Things were just spiraling out of control and I wasn't able to do my self-help stuff. I would go get help, because I would not do what my parents did, which was just to allow themselves to spiral down into this, completely dysfunctional lifestyle, and then, sit back and cry the blues. Woe is me. That's being totally, dishonest with yourself. Like, my parents would not take responsibility for the way they ended up. And so, we have to do that, right? As adults here on the planet, it is our responsibility. And we have to we have to do what's right for ourselves. And in turn, helps other people around us, because if our emotions are healthy and our behaviors are healthy, then the people who are in our lives, of course, it's going to affect them as well in a better light. You know what I mean? But we really owe it to ourselves. You know what I mean? We have to. It is ultimately our responsibility to make sure that we get the help that we need. Because this is not our fault, all of this stuff. But we do have to go back and fix it. And it's a sad situation. We never should have had to do this, but so many times people say, well, why me? That was my mother. A martyr and crying the blues all the time. Look, I was abused as a child, all this stuff, and then she'd go and abuse her own children. And, that's really absolutely horrible way to be, but that's what people do. And so it just passed on the cycle of abuse, right? So we as adult survivors, we have to make sure that we don't even do that with ourselves. We need to actually allow ourselves to get help and to reach out and get the help from whatever source we can find, whether it's a counselor, therapist, group support, online group support. That's what I like. Whatever works for you, even self-help, but whatever's working. As long as it's helping you out and you can do it, then that's great, because we all deserve to have a better life, And it is ultimately up to us. I can't at the end of the road sit back and say, oh, well, poor me, It is ultimately my responsibility how my adult life is going to go. So I can't blame that on anybody else. So that's why my parents were very famous for doing that, blaming everything on everybody else. But I recognize those behaviors, so I'm like, no, I can't do that. I have to take responsibility for my own life, right? So we all do. So thanks, everybody, for being here. I had a lot of people here this morning, DeMarco and Gypsy Witch and Stephen, and I appreciate everybody taking the time to tune in this morning. And, if you need help, if you need some information that I might have as far as resources and information that I've been reading and whatnot, let me know. And otherwise, I'll see you guys on Monday, same time, same place, 6 o'clock a.m. for Monday's show. I do have a couple shows on the weekend, but I'm going to be canceling those because I have company from out of town here, so I am busy this weekend. So I will be back on Monday morning, same time, same place, 6 o'clock a.m. But make sure you get some help. Do not allow yourself to suffer. And, if you have to call a crisis line, you call a crisis line. But you do whatever you have to do, to get help, right? Do not allow yourself to suffer and just suffer on by yourself. You can reach out anonymously. You don't even have to give your name. You don't even have to tell people who you are. There's all kinds of great stuff out there where you can just reach out anonymously, right? So it's really, really cool. Make sure you do that because you so deserve to have a better life, right? Thanks, everybody, for being here, and have a great day. Talk soon. Bye-bye.